Well, their ancestors probably came from Asia, although we haven't quite figured out yet exactly from which wolf population they evolved from.
How can you tell what's a pure dingo and what's a mixed breed? Are there, distinguished markings?
So what we did is we looked at over 195,000 bits of DNA or DNA sites across the genome, and we compared dingoes from around the world as well as to domestic dogs from various breeds. And when we did that analysis, we found that, first of all, the dingoes are very distinct from the dogs, but also that there were very few animals that had a significant amount of dog ancestry in them.
And how were the dogs introduced?
How were the dogs introduced? So dogs are pets with humans. They've been with us since Europeans came to Australia, basically.
Right.
And so there's been concern that pet dogs or farm dogs would go out into the bush and then breed with dingoes. And so therefore there was concern that dingoes were breeding themselves into extinction. And certainly the previous DNA testing suggested that. But when we look at this more advanced DNA testing method, we can see that actually that's not happening to the extent that we thought.
Right. So pure dingoes are now on the threatened species list in at least 2 states. Is there a need for a special breeding or conservation program?
I don't think we necessarily need conservation breeding, but we definitely need to be thinking about how we're managing dingoes in the landscape. So at the moment, dingoes are controlled and not treated as a native animal in most national parks. They're controlled as wild dogs. And this research is telling us that really there are no wild dogs in the bush. They're all dingoes, and dingoes are a native animal. So we should be thinking about how we can protect dingoes in national parks rather than bait them.
Right. So you're pushing for a name change instead of just wild dogs or pests. You're thinking a name change would actually help align with First Nations people who also respect and acknowledge the dingo as a native and culturally significant species.
Exactly. I think that's a really important point. And I think a lot of people, the general public, don't understand that when the government is talking about wild dog control and wild dog baiting programs, that they're actually referring to dingoes. The definition of wild dog that's used by the government includes dingoes in them. So it's very much part of the practice.
Now, there is an intersection of the ecosystem and the economy, of course. Dingoes are said to be a threat to livestock. They are currently, as you mentioned, seen as pests, much like, wild rabbits or kangaroos, I suppose. Is there a middle ground in which we can protect dingoes and at the same time protect livestock?
Definitely. So there are a range of options that farmers can put in place to try to minimize the livestock predation from dingoes. But also, basically we need to have places in the landscape.
What would those measures be?
So like livestock guardian dogs or putting up electric fences are just 2 of the options, but it's not an easy fix. There's going to probably have to be still lethal control as a tool for farmers to use, but I guess we might suggest a shift in the sorts of tools that we're using. So at the moment, for example, there's a large reliance on aerial baiting programs, particularly in national park areas or conservation areas, and really that shouldn't be happening if dingoes are a native species, which they are. And instead, maybe farmers could look at using trapping or shooting to remove problem animals. So targeting the specific animals that are causing them problems rather than the whole population.